The Spinoff Podcast Network. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
The Fold is brought to you by O-Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Nau mai, hoki mai, kia The Fold, e mihi ne ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. My guest this week on The Fold is Guy Williams, who you're going to have heard of. He's probably be one of the more famous people to have appeared on this podcast. And he's here because he's actually starting his own podcast. Actually, this would be his second published podcast. He does one called Advanced Analytics with his brother Paul, which is it's about the NBA, and the name is wildly misleading. It's a really fun basketball podcast, which you should check out. But this is his first sort of big grown-up proper podcast after many years of doing radio and trying to start podcasts. It's a spin-off of New Zealand Today, his very successful comedy, which is him as a sort of a fake journalist going around New Zealand investigating these just kind of small town incidents and people and so on. And he's taken one of those, Karen, who went viral just based on her voice alone for her 20 wax phone message, and has become, by the sounds of it, like a friend and now a collaborator of Guy's. And I think that the nature of this podcast, which I should say is part of the launch of Freddie Boy, which is a new podcast network just around the corner from us, actually, run out of Kevin & Co., who produce New Zealand Today and Taskmaster and a bunch of other great New Zealand comedy shows. What I think the best of Guy, and he's an acquired taste. There are people I know who I think have great sense of humour who can't stand him. Sorry, Guy, it's true. There are others, and I'm among them, who think he's incredibly funny and has a really broad range. As we discussed, like the first time I saw him, he was doing really, really good sort of awkward anti-comedy stuff in a small hall, but he can also just go on a big stage and wow a big crowd who might not have much of a relationship to stand-up comedy. And what unifies it all, and what makes, I think this podcast an interesting thing, is that he's just like a person who is deeply curious about people. And while he is like a massive loudmouth, and at times you're not 100% sure that he's listening to you before he launches into his response, again, sorry, Guy, there is just a genuine love for and interest in the whole of this country and how it knits together. And, I think the thing that makes New Zealand today interesting is that the sort of small towns and the characters that he finds just aren't on television very much. They're not on mass media. They have their own cultures and idiosyncrasies, and yet by the time, and people from those towns might even make it to be part of television, but by the time they're there, the edges are smoothed off. They're not recruited because they have these, particular kind of, whether it's dialects or perspectives or these local cultures. And the best of New Zealand Today really glories in that. At times it gets tense. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's an uncomplicated watch, and we do discuss that a bit. But I think the fact that Guy has got to a place in his career where he's making a show that is very much in his image and his comedic aid is a really great thing. And from there, we talk about why it's such a rare thing that he got to do that, and what the opportunities to do more of that in this country are. I think it's a really fun listen. I've known Guy for a long time, and we just sort of get into it. Before we start, I want to thank Vodafone. They are the world-class network technology that we're currently recording on, and runs like a dream. So if you're looking for that for your business, go to vodafone.co.nz. This is Guy Williams on The Fold. Kia ora, Guy, and welcome to The Fold.
Kia ora, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here.
I'm very, very glad to have you on board. This is actually, we did an unreleased podcast many years ago. Do you remember? We recorded it at The Edge.
I do not remember this at all. Did I interview you?
You interviewed me.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to do an interview podcast when I worked in radio, and I recorded some gold. I talked to Julianne Genter and the rapper PNC and Duncan Greive, and I really liked it, but then I just was too busy and did nothing with it. But I promise you, man, that was hot fire stuff.
Yeah, it was good. I loved that the range of it in those three people. But I guess that's a roundabout way of saying this is something, and Freddie Boy and the NZ Today podcast is something you've been wanting to do for a long, long time.
Yeah, I'm a mediocre white man, so I just want to do a podcast. It's my dream. Every day I'm trying to record a podcast. Everyone I see, I'm like, you want to do a podcast? I was at Peter Pit the other day, and I saw my childhood friend. He runs the Peter Pit, and I was like, man, you want to do a podcast? He wasn't keen. He was more working at the Peter Pit at the moment. But he, I'm always looking for podcasts. If you want to do a podcast, man, I'm keen. Or we're doing a podcast right now. But I love doing podcasts. And unfortunately, though, I've had no real reason to do a podcast. I have nothing interesting to say. I have no skills or abilities. But into season 3 season 2 of New Zealand Today, they wrote into the pitch that we would also do a podcast. And that was good because it forced me to finally do one. And I'm so excited to be doing a podcast.
So let's start by talking about the big thing, which is Freddie Boy, the network that it's part of, and then about the specifics of your collab with Karen. So tell me about Freddie Boy.
Kevin & Co., the great production company, they started out of Jono and Ben, really, but they made Funny Girls, Creamery, Pax Asadi's upcoming project, Raised by Refugees. They Taskmaster is one of the big shows as well, and New Zealand Today. That's my long-term producer, Bronwyn, and her husband, Cam. They're great, and they started this production company to make good television. And then Cam's also trying to do some podcasts as well, and this is the start of it. Yeah, it's exciting.
And so for you, like you said, you've been trying to do podcasts for a long, long time, just walking up to people in the street, essentially. What is it about Karen that has made you go, that's my that's my talent, that's my
She was available, and there was a COVID lockdown, and we were both in the South Island, so we were able to record. No, it was a little bit organic like that, to be honest, Duncan, because the whole thing's not very well thought through. But I think I've stumbled onto something good, which is often how good things happen. I feel. I don't know if you have that experience or not. No.
About things happening organically and without necessarily a huge amount of planning. Absolutely, this whole spin-off is basically that.
Because I actually wanted to do a podcast because I wanted to do a New Zealand Today podcast, and I wanted to do it like the TV show, but do like a long form investigation into something. And I wanted to do one about your mate, who you did an article on. I was actually inspired by an article by you about the guy who runs a bar in the Viaduct called Headquarters. His name's Leo Malloy.
Yeah.
And you did a great article about him, and I was kind of inspired by that, and he was running for mayor, and I wanted to call it Leo Malloy Runs for Mayor. Maybe I still would, and just cover his journey to the mayoralty, because I find Auckland politics, from Len Brown versus Luigi Waluigi, through to John Tamahiri wanting to build a 16-lane bridge over the Auckland Harbour. Like
John Banks denying paternity of his own son, who looks exactly like John Banks.
It's amazing. Every week it just pulls up the most amazing things, and no one seems to cover it that well. Like the Spinoff does a good job, and that's about it. And it's just no one cares. And it's also the Auckland mayoralty and Auckland politics is a big deal. Like the Auckland mayor is a very powerful position that controls millions of dollars of taxpayer money, and just no one seems to give a stuff about it. It's so weird.
Yeah, I also so this is why you've decided to do a podcast with Karen, is your fascination with Auckland local body politics.
No, I wanted to do a long form research thing. but I was too busy, right?
Yeah.
And I would have been bad at that anyway, because I'm not a real journalist and I didn't have the resources. This is a low budget podcast. And so in the end, I wanted to do an episode with Karen because I genuinely think she is just the most amazing person, and I love listening to her, so I'm sure more people would like listening to her. If you don't know who Karen is, by the way, she's a New Zealand viral video. She started as the 20 effing wax was her video, and if you don't know the call, it goes, she's calling up someone asking for $20 back for some weed, and she says, I'll get my $20, so you're going to get 20 effing wax, 20 effing wax, and she's got the grittiest smoker's voice. And her just way with words is like, it's almost poetry, the phone call. If you don't know it, Google it. And I went and interviewed her. It was one of the most successful segments of my TV show that I've ever done. And I just fell in love with her straight away. From the moment I met her and I asked her, you wanted to give this woman, Rachel, 20 wax. Who else do you want to give 20 wax? As soon as she said Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, I was like, wow, there's more to this person than I thought, just being an angry Kiwi battler. And Karen to me is like a really, really fascinating character. And I don't know if she appeals to you, and I don't know if people just think she's just an angry lady, but I genuinely think she's someone who should be on radio or talkback. And so I'm so excited to do this podcast with her because I've been a comedian for 10 years. I don't know what people think of me as a comedian, but she blows me out the water, eh? She is so talented. She's so funny. She's so interesting. And I'm genuinely proud of this podcast. And it's nothing to do with me. It's all because of her.
So, I mean, that gets to something which I've always found quite interesting about New Zealand today and potentially like resolves it in a way, which is that, you know, at times when you're watching it, it can be hard to figure out where the line is between the sort of love for and celebration of these kind of ornery characters of sort of smaller town New Zealand versus the exploitation of them. And Karen's arc into actually, you know, now becoming some kind of media personality and you forging a deeper relationship suggests that it hopefully is more in the former. Do you ever struggle with that about your sort of relationship to the subjects and the way that they're sort of rendered on screen and then go about their lives?
Yeah, it's an awkward part of New Zealand today, and so much of like modern, like kind of vox pop media. It's like everyone we talk to, you're like, is this okay? What is my relationship with these people? What are we doing here? As you said, and yeah, it is a really tricky thing to deal with. And I guess the way I justify my horrible existence, I'm proud of New Zealand today and generally like it, but the way I justify what we do and stuff like that and how the show works is I hope that most people in New Zealand today, even if they get painted not in the best light, there's been a few people who maybe don't look the best. I still think there's like a love there and a little bit of understanding. I could be wrong, and I mean, everyone can view it in their own light, but I genuinely really like almost every character we've ever spoken to. Like New Zealand Today, we generally film a story over 2 days, so you really get to know the person. We often go out to dinner and stuff like that, and most of them I don't leave going, hey, I want to screw this person over in the edit or make them look like an asshole. I genuinely really appreciate them and love them. Even the people I disagree with, even Murray Chong, the racist councillor in Taranaki, like we still text occasionally. We still, you know, like keep in touch or film 2 segments with him. And maybe that's another kettle of fish because maybe I'm bad for platforming him. But I genuinely like Murray Chong. I don't think he should be a councillor. I think a lot of his views are very problematic, and there's a lot of things with him about him that I strongly disagree with. But I like hanging out with him, and I like him as a person. You know, it's weird to say for someone that I disagree with so strongly, but I think that's part of the charm of New Zealand today as well, I think.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think that there is this era which has a quite an intense, there is a thread which is that you, like you said, you shouldn't platform these people, and that that even having a friendship or a relationship of any kind with someone who holds those views is somehow anathema. But there is something about watching New Zealand Today at its best where you sort of feel like, you know, it's a way of taking people who would never get in the same room, who might never encounter one another, and allowing them to sort of at least have an understanding of the different realities of one another's lives, and from there, well, it's sort of up to us where we take that. You know, that seems to be quite a beautiful thing that might come of it.
When I go on the internet, I have such a dark view of society because we're getting like, you know, tidbits and tweets and one-liners about everyone's lives. It's so It's so easy to leave the internet or social media and think this person is awful. I don't like this person. This person's my enemy. And New Zealand today, for me anyway, I don't know what the experience the viewer gets, just has the complete opposite effect. I go in thinking, fuck this person, they're a misogynist, stuff this person, they're a racist, or whatever, you know, the premise might be of the story. And they're not all like that, but it is kind of a recurring theme on the show that I talk to people who are famous for kind of problematic views. And 98% of the time I leave going, hey, I really like that person's good. And I can normally trace to where they've gone off the rails. And I don't want to justify it or exonerate them or anything like that. But sometimes I just want to say, I vaguely understand, I can empathize a little bit, and I like this person. I just wish they didn't have this view or this part of their personality, you know?
Yeah, there's a complexity. It allows for a greater complexity of
But
person.
Karen was never like that. Karen was love at first sight. Do you love Karen? I don't know. Have you seen my video I've done with Karen?
Yeah, I love the video with Karen. I think she's like wildly charismatic, and you know, I'm curious to see how it holds up over how many podcast episodes are we talking? Is this ongoing
10.
or is it limited?
10 episodes.
And have you recorded them? What's the situation?
We've recorded all 10, and I just love her, so I just get stuck in. It's a bit. We're both a little bit. I was going to say ADD. I don't know if that's wrong to just like casually throw that word around like that, but like both our minds jump around a lot.
Correct.
We change subjects. We're both quite self-absorbed, so that creates a bit of an interesting dynamic where there is bits where we're arguing or we're talking and we don't even listen to what the other person is saying. But the stories that Karen comes out with and the interactions we have are pretty fascinating, right? Me and her just started doing live shows. I was just doing live shows because I was like, man, New Zealand needs to see what Karen's like. And I immediately heard a few tidbits. She would give me stories about, and a lot of them are quite tragic, but Karen is happy to tell them. And she also tells them in a hilarious way. Karen went to jail that's on episode 1, when she was 17 because she overdosed, and when she was in hospital, the police charged her, went through her bag and found 3 tabs of acid. And that's amazing. But the way Karen tells it now is the most amazing story, and it's sad, and it's, you know, it's angering in some points, and it's also hilarious at the same time. It's genuinely wonderful. Karen stabbed a man twice, was found not guilty on the grounds of self-defense. A man who would not leave her house and was there in her house for hours. And and then she has the advice, don't stab someone. No, her advice is in an argument, don't ever pick up a knife, because it's easier to stab someone than you think it is. But that's just like a roller coaster of a tale that from her life, which has just been the most fascinating life. And she's such a good storyteller that I'm just like, really lucky to be able to listen to her, I think.
Yeah, and these are sort of New Zealand lives that are often only featured on television or in our media when something goes badly wrong. Well, yeah. If you let me finish.
Sorry.
Good.
Sorry.
Just when something goes badly wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like to have her explaining herself, explaining her life story in a sort of a much less mediated way sounds great. We'll just take a very quick break and return with more from Guy Williams. The Fold is brought to you by O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa, with over 4,000 out-of-home advertising sites nationwide across both street furniture and retail centres. I'm super grateful to O Media for enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
We're back with Guy Williams now. I wanted to talk about a period of your career, which I'm really fascinated by because it felt like you were... Because when I first started... I saw your first comedy shows, or the first comedy shows of yours I saw, and you were like this disheveled guy. You had a bunch of posters and maybe like a VHS tape, and I think you and Rose were doing a show together, Rose Matawheo, in like a Greyland community hall, and it was a real shambles. It was very funny. And then it felt like in the blink of an eye, 5 years later, you're on The Edge, you're on Jono and Ben, and you've almost become the establishment that show felt like a critique of in some respects.
Oh man, tell me about it. Yeah, it's bleak, bro. I sold out.
Tell me sort of how you got there, and then why you, which no one ever does. People don't do this. I mean, if you pay attention, like people get on the radio and they stay on the radio for their whole life because, while it's hard work, it's very lucrative work, and you just sort of chopped it. So tell me about how you got there before you tell me about why you left.
Well, no, I sold out, right? So, and you're right, my aesthetic and stuff kind of changed. And the reason for that being, I think, and I don't know, is that I did deadpan, like one-liners, awkward comedy for so long. And I just found that too hard to sustain in New Zealand because I started emceeing stand-up comedy gigs at the Classic. And when you're the MC, you can't be deadpan, low energy because you're the guy who's got to energize the show. You've got to propel the show forward with confidence and let the audience know that it's going. And when you do your own show for an hour in just the shows I've been doing just the last couple of nights in Nelson, it's like it's so important that you let the audience know they're in good hands and that they're going to be taken on a journey. And that's not the case. If you're in Auckland or Wellington, people get it. They go to a lot of comedy shows. They enjoy anti-comedy or like subverting the tropes of stand-up comedy, whereas in small-town New Zealand, just because maybe it's not as savvy an audience, I'm not shitting on small-town New Zealand, I'm just saying they're not as used to going to gigs and stuff like that. They genuinely feel nervous for you. Like even last night in Nelson, when I was doing self-deprecating jokes in a comedy show, you still get like ahs or people like feeling sorry for me. It's the weirdest thing. And just in New Zealand in general, like so many subtle jokes and stuff like that don't hit. So I think it was emceeing comedy that just made me change, for better or worse, develop a more confident persona on stage. So it stems from stand-up, just to kind of get through those gigs and kind of like be a safe pair of hands. And from there, I was always on Jono and Ben. That's how I started, like on the Jono projects. And for TV as well, you slowly learned that like broader jokes go bigger. Like I wanted to be more like 7 Days or more like that. And so I have changed for better or worse. But I think with New Zealand Today, I found a really nice mix of like broad jokes that everyone can enjoy, that like a mainstream audience likes, and also subtle stuff that's just for me or just for comedy nerds and stuff like that, I think.
Just before, and I want to talk about that, but I do want to talk about commercial radio because I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And even notwithstanding your sort of mainstreaming that you were just describing, commercial radio is another animal again. It requires a particular sort of discipline, the culture of it as the whole media works, which you were there during the period where some of the stuff that was been reported on this year sounded pretty dark. Like, I'm not remotely associating you with that, but certainly there is a whole culture around it that is, just the whole reality of commercial radio is a specific thing. What was your time on the Edge like, and what did you sort of find ultimately kind of spat you out of that scene?
I really enjoyed my 3 years on the Edge. I just found it, I got into it because I was already friends with Sharon Casey, who was my co-host. Love Sharon. And then I became mates with Clint, my other co-host, and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed my 3 years at the Edge, but I found it very intense. It was a lot of work. It was crazy. It was a crazy time in my life because I was working on Jono and Ben, and they were as well, and also working on a radio show. Jono and Ben was like my competing radio show. It was the weirdest situation. So would film sketches in the morning, and then in the afternoon go to neighboring. It was the weirdest thing. And I was literally working 24 hours. And what I realized is that I was losing my mind. I was too busy. I was too sleep deprived. I was basically just doing a bunch of stuff that I wasn't really me. Like, I really enjoyed The Edge, and I love just like sampling different things. I'll work on any show. I'll do anything. I would love to. I disagree with News Talk ZB so strongly, but I would work on News Talk ZB for a couple of years just to see what the hell's going on. I'm just so interested in anything. I love talking to people. I love meeting new people. I enjoy that. And The Edge was like such a culture shock for me because, as you said, I was never like a mainstream kind of music kind of guy. Not that I was indie or cool, but I was just like, I was never into pop music. I was never into festivals or and then, next week, I didn't even go to O Week when I was at university. And then at The Edge, I had to go to O Week as part of my job. It was like really, really weird. And basically it just became too intense. Like I just had too much on, and I was just moving too far away from that hipster, awkward comedian that you first saw. And I was just not doing enough things that I wanted to do. And I realized that like, The Edge wasn't my passion. I did not enjoy talking about Kim Kardashian every day or talking about Troye Sivan or Ed Sheeran. I don't dislike those people. I just got sick of, they're not my interest, you know? So I just, it was a no-brainer to move away, and just because the workload was just too much, really. Yeah. I will say this, though, because I actually, obviously there's been big culture problems around radio, and I did not, I'm really glad to hear that it's being cleaned up and stuff like that, and I'm really glad to hear that people are getting called out for shit they did that was not right, and I feel embarrassed that I never saw or really noticed that during my time at The Edge. I really liked my show, and my co-hosts were great, and as far as I know, I didn't notice that. But I did notice in radio, there was just a weird culture in general, all across radio, and in New Zealand TV as well. It's TV and radio, just like, you'd notice this as well. Like, there's just a lot of strange personalities, people hilariously who have egos, even though they're just New Zealand famous and stuff like that. And I found the radio culture and the ratings culture and stuff like that very unusual and very stressful as well. And it was just quite a weird thing to be a part of. And that's not a criticism of anyone I worked with, because I appreciated the people I worked with every day, but I did find it quite difficult, and I couldn't hack it long term, I don't think.
So you have now arrived at this situation which is real rare in New Zealand comedy, where you have a show that is a vehicle for you that feels like it embodies your id in a way that, you know, a lot of people can be on a really successful show, but it's on some level it's a gig. But basically you've got this level of creative control that is very rare. And ultimately, like, it would be desirable to have more comedians have it, rather than, because I think within New Zealand who else has a vehicle like yours? Obviously, Pax has got this project coming up. There's a few people who get a little run, but yeah, what's the thing that will move New Zealand into a place where there is a bit more comfort with whether it's risk or an arrangement where there can be more New Zealand Todays for more New Zealand comedians?
Yeah, I'm blessed, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because I always want to say it to people and no one listens. But like, it's crazy. Like, how many New Zealand comedians have been able to make their own show? Like, zero, right? Like, when I was a kid, there was Pulp Sport, Moon TV, Back of the Y. There was a glut of like really low budget
Eating
ones.
Media Lunch. So it was a golden age of very weird TV comedy.
I forgot about Eating Media Lunch and Unauthorized History of New Zealand from Jeremy Wells as well. And what happened is, it's just unfortunate in my mind, is that unfortunately, you know, the TV bubble has burst. We've all moved to the internet, which is good, because New Zealand comedians are like succeeding more than they ever have in a completely different way through new media. Like, New Zealand comedians are bigger than they ever have been, but they're on TikTok and Facebook and stuff like that, and YouTube. But for me personally, I'm just like the luckiest person, because I got the last of that golden era of like, you know, New Zealand comedy being, you know, New Zealand, so not comedy so much as TV being willing to take risks. You know, Jono and Ben, even though it was like, you know, a combination, it was inspired by a lot of shows, was like its original show. It wasn't a format. It wasn't bought from Australia or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with shows being bought from Australia, and I love Taskmaster is one of my favorite New Zealand comedies, but it's with TV being so dire, and I think, you know, so risk adverse now, it's just so much easier to sell a format than it is to sell an original show. And the only reason my show got through the net is because it developed naturally on Jono and Ben. It was already a proven pilot. It did a season on Jono and Ben plus my track record before then. So literally people could see what it is and see that it might work. And plus there was probably money that it got to jump into that vacuum that Jono and Ben left. And so, yeah, it was just perfect timing and perfect example of New Zealand on air working, right? Because I developed on the Jono and Ben show very incrementally until I had a product that was like developed like properly, like an American pilot almost.
It had a brand.
It was ready to be its own TV show. I'm so lucky, man.
Yeah, and I just wonder where that next thing is coming from. And, you know, obviously like Rosa's success on some level will be attributable to the reps she got on Jono and Ben as well. But the fact of it,
she might not want to say that, but yeah,
well,
it all helped, absolutely. And 7 Days and Funny Girls, yeah, absolutely.
But without. I just wonder whether with shows like, I mean, Taskmaster is obviously an incredible show, but it is intensely formatted, and whether the current environment necessarily allows for the natural development of both talents and kind of ideas. And, you know, Jono and Ben wasn't a show that I particularly enjoyed in and of itself, but certainly what it. I'm just being honest, you know. I'm on the public record.
I'll defend it. We did some great shit, you know, and like people remember the last few years when we were running out of ideas a little bit and stuff like that. But Jono and Ben had some real highs.
There is no doubt about that. It's just, unfortunately, it was an hour-long show that had to be every week for 40 weeks a year. So inevitably, the quality control suffers on some degree. But the whole time, these talents were developing. You can even see someone like Chris Parker, you know, like his current sort of status. I don't think anyone could go through that machine and not be changed by it and not benefit from it. And that group of comics who felt like they were, you know, trying to get inside the mainstream have now become the establishment in some weird way. And you sort of wonder if for the next generation, and there's wildly talented people coming through, where their shot comes from in the same way.
Yeah. Well, the traditional broadcast TV windows are probably closing, although you see like the young comedians on 7 Days and stuff like that now who are jumping on there. So that's quite nice. But I think it comes through the internet. Like you can be, in the way I was lucky to get proven while getting money, unfortunately, now you kind of have to prove yourself without getting any money through the internet. But I think there's tons of like little startup funds. Like there's still the same amount of New Zealand on air money going out, and there's still the same amount of, I assume, I don't quote me on that. But the internet is really opening up a lot of opportunities. So I think it's still there. It's just not the same as it was, and it's a real shame there's not something like Jono and Ben to help develop talent and for people to develop on. You're right, yeah.
So you've made this podcast. You've got a new season of New Zealand Today. Is it shot, or what's the current status?
No, we're shooting it at the moment. I've been lucky that I have been locked down and then living in Nelson, so I've been able to film with a Christchurch-based crew around the South Island and stuff like that. And so hopefully it comes out as scheduled sometime early next year is the dream. But we've only shot 5 segments and we need to shoot 20 or something to make a show. So we've got a way to go. We're a quarter way through.
What's the future of the show like? I mean, New Zealand, just as with like there are these cycles with romance reality shows, you know, you sort of feel like there's a talent pool and it's not that deep, and once you're through it you just have to kind of let it refabulate.
In New Zealand it's deep, man. There's so many interesting people out there, and there's so many that I can't get hold of, and there's so many honestly, my list of stories I want to do for this season is 130 long, and there's some people who need to talk to lawyers, and there's some people who just aren't ready yet but say they'll be ready in 6 months' time. The talent pool is deep, so I don't have a problem with that. The limit on New Zealand Today is really my skill and my creativity, I think. Not that that's much, but it's hard to keep fresh and keep doing original things from my perspective. But the amount of amazing stories out there in New Zealand and the amount of amazing people is bottomless. It's just whether I can remain interesting and funny. That's the challenge, I think.
Huge challenge. It's also whether you can remain interested in it. Is there anything that's sort of itching, or a kind of whether it's a return to your sort of awkward comedy roots? You're sort of at this, like we said before, at this incredible, exultant, very rare situation where you have a show that is very much your own. What's next for you, do you think?
My dream is to copy the David Farrier model. Me and Farrier cross over so much as it is. I'm sure maybe he got cool glasses first.
He's had them the whole time.
I'm sure he copied pink shorts off me, though. I'm sure I had to stop wearing my pink shorts when Farrier started wearing.
What's your relationship with Farrier like? Like, I feel like you guys. It is good.
Oh, do you think we're rivals? That'd be cool.
On some level, I feel like it would be more fun if you guys didn't get on. If maybe you could shit talk him a little bit now.
No, well, we will become rivals one day when I get on his level. But no, it can't be. We can't be rivals because he is up another stratosphere. Just like I can't be rivals with Rose. Like if someone's on HBO, I can't be here making some YouTube videos for TV3 Discovery. Comparing, like it's not comparable at the moment. But I want to be rivals with Farrier, and this is hilarious. But I shot to a lot of events. I won't say what they are, but events where I'm there reporting for New Zealand Today, and he'll be there trying to film a pilot or something like that because sometimes our interests overlap.
This feels like a show.
And I always want to bring him into the story, and he's never keen but this is hilarious, and not because he's an asshole. David Farrier is the loveliest dude. Because he is undercover. And every time he's undercover, I always come up with my camera and go, "Hey, David, how's it going, mate?" He's like, "Fuck off." He's lovely, but he tries to pretend he doesn't know me because we worked together at TV3 for quite a few years. And every time I forget that I'm blowing his cover and that he's trying to be undercover at the Scientology New Zealand opening or something like that, and I out him every time. And it's just hilarious how many times that's happened. But I always want to make him a rival in my stories, and we haven't got to that level yet, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully that one seemingly quite achievable wish is in your future. Guy Williams, thank you so much. It's been real fun having you on the show.
No, really nice to talk to you, and nice to be on the podcast, and congratulations on your podcast and all the recent things the Spinoff has been doing at the moment, the redesign and the new editors and all the changes. Been awesome, man. And can I also say, I was in a batch the other day, and every batch in New Zealand has about 3 types of books. They have some John Grisham's, they have the Penguin History of New Zealand, and they have rugby players' biographies. And I remember that you wrote one of them, Dan Carter's biography. I haven't read it. It might be great, but you titled it My Story.
What did I title it?
How did you title the book My Story? Like a 6-year-old child writing the story of their school holidays. My Story. Dan Carter, My Story. What is that?
I think you're vastly overstating the degree of creative control I had over Dan Carter's autobiography.
But you must have gone into the meeting and gone, Dan had creative control. You must have went in an interview and gone, Dan, we can't call it My Story, bro.
I wasn't a huge fan. Look, to be honest, I wrote that book during the first year of the Spinoff. The bulk of it I wrote in two weeks. So I was just... But I think it holds up, and we got the fairy tale conclusion, so it sold real well. Hence, it's in batches across the nation. Hey, it's been real good to talk. We'll just try and end it again. Real good to see you, man. Hopefully we can hang out when you're back up in Auckland.
Yeah. Cheers, Duncan. I appreciate being on the podcast. Thanks.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to oOh!media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spinoff's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. The Spinoff Podcast Network.